And these were type A personalities, go-getters, tier one operators. And here you are saying, okay, let's hug a tree. Come on, boy. I'm sure
I'm
that
not
goes
scared
well.
of that. So no one's scared of it. No, I'm kidding. I could. It really depends on the person. It really depends on the person. I mean, honestly, it can depend on the day, right?
Uh,
If
true.
someone comes in that state, the first thing you have to check in with is where are they? What language are they using?
Sure.
Where's their mind? Where's their heart, right? What are their questions?
Yeah.
Because they're actually the one that's driving, right? I am a guide for all of that, and I can bring in any of the tools. And yeah, it really just depends. I mean, with physicality, one of the things that I love about Eastern medicine is that you can look at all the different levels and layers of a person and what they're going through. So
Hmm.
you may come in with an amputation or chronic pain, and that may say certain things about your body. Um, and there's no way that that's not connected to other parts of you, right?
Hmm.
That there is some story of trauma that's living in your nervous system.
Hi guys, welcome back to Neff Inspiration, my show on YouTube and as a podcast with me, your host, Stefan Neff. Today I've got Athena Desai with me. She is a holistic trauma specialist and has made it her mission to explore spirituality as a means to help modern day warriors to overcome the trauma that they have experienced. And extrapolating from that, we can learn so much about the many challenges that we are facing and the role that spirituality can actually play in our lives, in the way we show up for ourselves and in turn show up for others. Athena, welcome to my show.
Thank you so much, Stefan, for having me.
Ah, reading your bio, you have explored so many different forms of spirituality. When did that journey start? How did you get into this? When did you develop this conviction, this insight that there is so much to explore?
Very young, actually. I was just realizing the other day, my mother is Christian, she's Episcopalian. My father is Hindu, he's Indian. And from the beginning, even though I went to church, we also celebrated various ceremonies in Indian temple. And yeah, I heard my mother say once that my dad was a better Christian than half the Christians out there. And my dad, it may be true, he's a very, very kind sort of Buddha personality. So yeah, I've just always been curious. I went to a Jewish community school, so I started studying Judaism
Beautiful,
pretty young.
beautiful.
Buddhism, esoteric spirituality, magical traditions, Native American spirituality. Yeah, it's a pretty long list. And I can't get enough of it. I'll never stop studying, you know?
And it's so intriguing to hear your story because here you are. Many of these religions, these beliefs are trying to put themselves first. In other words, there's a bit of a competition there. And too many wars have been fought over this very critical misunderstanding. People look at what divides these religions. Here you were looking at what brings them together, or automatically seeing that. I love that saying of your mum, that your dad was a better Christian. I love that. So, is that not the way we should see religions? Is there, in your experience, is there more commonalities? Are they really so different? Or can we actually learn similarities from each of them and therefore bring people more together?
Yeah, I mean, I love that question and that point. Yeah, I really dig the differences and distinctions between them. I think they felt very threatening when I was younger, and I was holding very fast to, oh, there's one truth, many paths, right? Many paths, one goal.
Exactly.
And I do ultimately think that that is true. But I think the more that we can relax around the nature of the differences, the more the actual commonalities emerge. Um,
Mm.
and there are some really beautiful ones, I would agree.
And I can understand that there are that there is a lot to be learned about each religion, but you didn't stop with religions. You went back to indigenous tribes, you went back to shamanic wisdom, you went far further out there than others. How can you combine that? Because there is there's typically, if you were to listen to many opinions of the church or churchgoers, so Judeo-Christian, for them, the pagans, the shamanic things, they are satanic. They're negative. There's how the hell can you even put that in your mouth? Hmm. How does that
Yeah,
work?
I think that's an argument that serves the structure and hierarchy and power of organized religion pretty well.
Hmm.
But if you peel back the layers and look at all the roots, which you know, I'm still doing on a daily basis, um, there's so many roots of shamanism, what was called animism, paganism in even those religions themselves, right? They may not be recognizing it or naming it or owning it. Christmas is a wonderful example. I love it so much. And there's much to love. And again, actually, you remind me what one of the most appealing things about shamanism is. I tend to think of it as earth medicine,
Hmm.
and it's medicine that is very strong in its commonalities through space and time and people. And that is because there's a recognition that there is consciousness in all life and that we are not the end, right? We are one part of such an intricate,
Hmm.
infinite
Yeah,
system. And yeah, there's every reason to be talking about that these days, right? As
absolutely.
discussed.
And I think what amazes me is that there is actually a large group of people that subscribe to the spirituality on that one hand there, and they can be actually be quite extreme. They only focus on crystals. They only focus on energy, movement within the body, within the universe. Many of the things that you describe are very much there, the chakras, everything. But for them, they are so extreme that, for example, vaccinations are evil or modern day medicine are evil. Again, I see a divisiveness there between to say this is the only way that we should live, whilst you are a far more down to down to earth, pun intended, of medicine. That you're a woman who is far more inclusive. You seem to be taking the best out of all worlds and utilizing them to address problems that people who work with you are suffering from. Typically the PTSD, typically the trauma related mental health problems. And that is an amazing, wonderful thing. So how do you pick and choose? How what do you do? So you've got a warrior, someone who walks into the wrong end of a machine gun somewhere in Kandahar, and then 3 years later is still a mess. Things are hugely traumatic. Life has unraveled. Meanwhile, there has been a medical discharge of a soldier, and they have lost their purpose. They have lost maybe their body or parts of it. Um, they don't know what the hell. And these were type A personalities, go-getters, tier one operators. And here you are. saying, okay, let's hug a tree. Come on, boy. I'm sure
I'm
that
not
goes
sure
well.
of that. So no one's scared of it. No, I'm kidding. I could. It really depends on the person. It really depends on the person. I mean, honestly, it can depend on the day, right?
Uh,
If
true,
someone comes in that state, the first thing you have to check in with is where are they? What language are they using?
sure.
Where's their mind? Where's their heart, right? What are their questions?
Yeah.
Because they're actually the one that's driving, right? I am a guide for all of that, and I can bring in any of the tools. And yeah, it really just depends. I mean, with physicality, one of the things that I love about Eastern medicine is that you can look at all the different levels and layers of a person and what they're going through. So
Mm,
you may come in with an amputation or chronic pain, and that may say certain things about your body. Um, and there's no way that that's not connected to other parts of you, right?
mm,
That there is some story of trauma that's living in your nervous system,
mm,
that there isn't some way that the universe and your own life and your own soul are asking you to learn from that thing. So I always try to work with a person where they are. And I do push the envelope. I do like finding out where the boundaries are. And I think it's a pretty self-selective group, right? Like if you are going to come to me, there is some part of you that's asking these questions consciously or not,
nice.
right? How do I connect to my own light? How
Nice.
do I start to know my magic better? So yeah, often that's not a conscious question, but I think it's there.
That's a very good point, isn't it? And that's where we say the teacher will appear when the student is ready, because they maybe 2 years ago they were a very different person, but now they have evolved, and this is beautiful. And then when you're actually open and start asking the right questions, the how questions, not why me? Well, your brain will give you 20 different reasons why you. But if you ask how questions or differently worded questions, suddenly the teachers appear. And sometimes they appear in the form of nature, and you're actually seeking that out. When I said hugging a tree, of course I was making fun, yet at the same token, I'm not. Because
Right.
nature is so powerful, isn't it? To hug a tree, to be there, to actually touch the tree and talk to the tree, or talk to the sand, or talk to other things, is actually a very, very powerful thing.
Incredibly powerful, incredibly ancient, incredibly timeless. We have to communicate with nature through our hearts, right? That's something that I'm learning on the shamanic path. And so it can sound very silly and very out there. And I really just encourage people to try it, right? I mean, it takes a certain amount of stillness and listening and faith and experimentation, but it's wired in our DNA, I'm
Mm,
pretty sure, as a
mm,
part of nature that we can connect to nature profoundly.
mm,
It's just something that we've become unaccustomed to through modernity and technology and
mm,
busyness and
mm.
all of that.
I think nowadays we also have got science on our side, because we can actually measure the amount of or the different light spectrums that you see in a forest, that you see when you're surrounded by green, that there are very beneficial light spectrums there that are indeed very productive, very helpful for the body to feel better, to get to a different state of perception. The sheer fact that we actually have to walk into a green area, there is a bit of movement, there's a bit of exercise associated with that. Inevitably, that reduces a certain degree of anxiety because we actually take action. And practically there is actually something happening there. We're actually washing out some of the rubbish out of our brain, out of around our cells by us taking that, plus the increased oxygen out there, etc., etc. There's actually quite some evidence there that being out there in nature is actually very good. Leave alone the vitamin D um, support that the sunlight gives us. And in all fairness, for me, it's very hard to be depressed when I'm sitting in some beautiful sunshine. It is, it, I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. And so, but you have to take to be still. Many people don't know how to be still. This is not something that is taught at school or rarely taught in school. Maybe nowadays there are the odd classes. Uh, how can we increase our awareness of the importance of the parasympathetic nervous system? How can we increase the daily practice of putting mindful pauses in and looking after ourselves in a different way?
Great question. And I think that it's time for some radically honest audits of how we are doing, right? I
Nice,
mean, I think
nice.
it's easy to dismiss mindfulness and stillness. And I mean, it is a growing trend as well to pay attention to it. But in the places that you mentioned, if you were to do the audit, well, what is working about how we are in these spaces and what is not working?
Mm,
And if you look at the places where it really isn't working, we are overwhelmed, we're overstressed, we're overstimulated, we're overscheduled, we're overworked. I mean, enter something like COVID or a really traumatic experience, which we could actually turn to as a teacher. I mean, I do this all
mm,
the time with people and their own personal traumas, right?
mm,
We cannot change what happened to us, but we can always transform our orientation to that thing,
mm, mm,
to that person, to that
mm,
event, to our feelings.
mm.
And that is just really hard work, right? I mean, it takes a level, and I am one of the most restless people on the planet. So if I can do any of this, anyone can. Um, yeah, it takes being able to be with some incredibly uncomfortable feelings and energy states. And stillness is
Mm,
a quality, spaciousness is a quality that I don't see how it's possible without them, actually.
mm. I think
So,
we are all so used to escaping our reality and the instant gratification that we can nowadays achieve with food being constantly around us, with 100% a day access to social media that keeps us distracted, and many, many other ways of escaping our reality. This has become the norm rather than a treat, and I think that is one of the biggest problems that we are facing at the moment in society, in many societies, shall I say. The to purposefully switch off and actually be out there and
yeah.
focus inwards, interoception, to feel. That is one of the hardest things. I loved the way you put that. Because often enough, our emotions are negative. Many of them are because there is a lot of negativity out there. Not just something when I'm now talking about, let's say, the media or the other influences, external influences. No, also inside we are warriors, not warriors. We worry a lot about things. 80% of our thoughts are negative. Now that makes sense from a survival point of view, that we worry about things, that we have a heightened awareness of that because that kept us as a species alive. So it makes sense from that point of view to be wired like that. But at the same token, if you don't take time to actually feel those emotions, to hear those thoughts, and then to be inquisitive and curious, to question those thoughts. Are you actually right? Is that emotion actually right? Oh my God, the world will end because that email has come in. Well, is that actually right? So how can we do that? So yes, we both agree on the need to do that. But how do you do that? How do you deal with a businessman who is hyperactive, who has been a go-getter, he has been out there defining himself with the American dream, cliche to the max. But here he is, obviously a real man's man who doesn't stop. I only need 4 hours of sleep and I drink gallons of coffee and look at me, what I achieve. I make 1 million a year. How do you tell someone? Well, do you tell them or how do you guide them? Which questions can you ask this person?
I do usually start by noticing what questions are they asking, because if you have done the very courageous action of asking for help, there's usually
Hmm,
something that you have woken up to. You have noticed something.
nice.
You need something.
Hmm,
You are acknowledging something has to shift in
hmm,
some way.
yeah.
You don't need to know the whole scope of it, right? Some people don't even know necessarily what it's about, but they can at least describe what they're feeling
Hmm,
and what they're going through, what they're experiencing every day. So once I get a sense of that, then what questions do you ask? Oh, again, so dependent on the person, but I really like to try to peel back the layers of what you can't see from the level of consciousness that you have, right?
hmm,
Albert Einstein said no problem can be solved at the level of consciousness at which it was created, right?
hmm,
So just asking hard, challenging, loving,
hmm,
non-judgmental, open questions can really help someone actually pause, actually pause to answer. I think that's one of the things that's hardest to do on our own, that we'll just go through our day and we'll complete our missions and we'll get our work done and we'll clock in and clock out. And I have these responsibilities and those things to do. And it's really easy to just not check in with yourself and your parts that whole time.
hmm,
So, as a practitioner, creating this space, and you know what? I don't think I would have given you this answer 12 years ago when I started as an
hmm,
acupuncturist.
hmm,
I probably would have tried to throw out all the tools and the things, and they're useful. But ultimately, you're creating a space and you're
yeah.
holding a container for someone to step in with their own wisdom.
Hmm,
And there really, aren't enough spaces just in a regular quotidian
hmm,
mainstream life to do that. So we need support. I mean, that's why we're all here and we all
hmm,
have different roles. We need
hmm.
help. We do it,
Very good.
right?
And you need to be introduced to the various tools in your toolkit, in your toolbox, shall I say, because there's so many things, starting from breath work, learning how to use breath to regulate your state. And I think that is probably one of the key things in many lives, one of the low-hanging fruits. Once you get to know a way of calming down a fight and flight state into more a calm state. And in this calm state, then that is the start where we can work with. And then there's the meditation. And if you're religious, deep prayers, which is actually quite intriguing. Recently, I learned that some of the prayers in the Catholic Church, the way they are designed, probably subconsciously, is equally to reduce the frequency of breath, which is exactly the amount or the technique that breathwork often employs. If you do box breathing or triangular breathing, whatever it is, we're actually reducing the breaths to about 4 or 6 a minute compared with the panting of the fight and flight. So here we are. So breath and stillness is wonderful. But with you having been exposed to so many religions, so many thought systems, what are, if you were to talk about the three things that you most oftenly use for yourself and maybe also for others, what would they be?
I would say number one these days is ritual. Um, well, close second, meditation.
Uh-huh.
And then third would probably be intentional movement. So, ritual, do you want me to explain a little bit?
Yes, please, because that sounds very much like habits to me, but I'm assuming here. Um, what is ritual for you?
Ritual for me is an intentional, sacred, devoted time and space in which I'm able to connect with the ethereal through the material. So, for instance, I'm studying plant medicine, yes, and I sit with hape or ceremonial tobacco snuff almost daily. And I've been doing this for some years now. And so, after I've done my prayer and meditation, I will go to the same space at an altar, sit down, take out my hape and my kuripe, which is allows you to blow it into your nose and self-administer. I have things to cleanse myself nearby. I have tarot cards and divination that I'll do in communication with the spirit of tobacco, one of my favorites. And he's amazing. And I had a very addictive relationship with him in the past. So it's my heart to have a sacred relationship with him now. But there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. You know, I get to invoke all of my spirit guides in the beginning of that. I get to hear the voice of the grandfather, tobacco. In that process, I get to ask questions and download his wisdom. And it's just a totally different start to the day. So ritual is pretty up there. Meditation in terms of creating spaciousness in my mind. I mean, I have a very, very active, some might say even overactive, restless, impatient, anxious mind. So, the reminder daily, beginning and end of every day, the reminder that I can actually connect with my breath at any point that I choose or wake up to it throughout the day. I need that uh, quite a bit. And then intention, I don't even remember the question I'm answering anymore. I hope that I.
You are. I was trying to get examples of those techniques that you most commonly use nowadays to help yourself ground yourself, to help yourself to uh, become one within yourself, heart, mind, soul, however you distinguish the various forms of energy or consciousness that make you. How can you bring yourself together? And you answered that. You answered that. The meditation is interesting. The meditation is certainly something that many people try out there, but that it's actually not easy to do. And I think many people very quickly fall off that path because it is not an immediate kind of feedback. You need to practice that muscle. You need to train that muscle of meditation quite a bit, in my experience, to actually get there.
Yeah.
But sometimes,
I like meditation itself as training
mm,
so that you can remove I hear this so many times, I can't meditate. Why? Because you can't actually sit down and turn on a timer and try to connect to your breath. That's never the case.
yeah,
It's always how people think they're performing it. But if it's a training, right,
yeah,
and it's something that you're consistently doing and you show up no matter what, I mean,
yeah,
it's not a state of bliss all the time. It's the practice, literally. It's you training your brain. How much
mm,
does it take us to even remember that we can pause and take a breath? It's
mm.
right. Sorry to interrupt, but I
Not
get
at
that a lot.
all, not at all. Because I'm exactly that kind of dude. I feel guilty when I don't do anything. I feel guilty. There's this ingrained, my God, don't waste your time kind of thing. And now I'm sitting here, sitting still. You're kidding me. One of the ways that I've recently learned to overcome it when my brain gets into this kind of ratty kind of attitude. I had gone for a long walk. I was now sitting down to do some meditation, and oh, it was hard, out of reasons whatsoever. And I started being grateful. I'm happy and grateful that, and then that became very quickly very boring. And then I suddenly started talking to the wind and talking to the sand. And suddenly I was surprised what came out of there. And it was this little bit of out of body experience. And suddenly you see yourself sitting there talking and actually listening to what is coming out of your mouth. And you think, huh, now that's interesting. And it is beautiful. But what I gave myself the chance to do, I just persevered. I could have distracted myself. I could have maybe taken my phone out and instead look at social media. But I just kept persevering and one didn't work. And then I tried the gratitude kind of formula and that didn't really hit home. But suddenly, because I was then talking and being interactive kind of with the thoughts and with what was coming out of there, that was beautiful. And that actually was what I was needed, what I
Yeah.
needed at that moment in time. And that surprised me. So the answers are there, and
Yep.
the whoever runs the show out there allows you to hear those answers, but you have to
Mhm.
learn. It's like a different language, isn't it? You have to learn that language rather than having it served on a platter.
Yes. I mean, they will also hold your hand while you sink even further into the not knowing. That's been a lot of my adult life is actually not knowing and not hearing answers and having to struggle against that until I started learning that it's actually quite an incredible skill to be able to be with not knowing as well. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've sat with Hape and I'll hear him say, relax. Yep. And I'll ask a question and he'll be like, well, what's underneath that question? And by the end of maybe 20, 30, 40 minutes, then I'm like, oh, yeah, that wound, that thing. Oh,
Which is good. So ultimately, you've got your own counselor there on speed dial, and you don't even have to pay for it. That's actually quite a cool thing. I like that.
you can always have a direct experience of God, right? Considering that we are God ourselves. And I do
Ooh.
think that that's often what tries to exist in the separation with things like organization. Not all. I mean, certainly there's
Yeah.
plenty of practices within religions to do that. But as we talked
It's
about,
No,
sorry.
I have just to laugh because about 500 years ago you would have been burned as a witch on the cross
Oh,
somewhere because of that statement. Yet when we go back to about 400 after Christ, where some old dudes sat together and said, "Okay, the Bible, we'll take that book, that book, that book. Now we don't like that book, so put that aside, and that is the Bible from now on. Now that is what we take." The books that didn't make it into the Bible, there's one of them where exactly it is said that Jesus and that God is us, that it is living in us, that we are it, and that therefore the answers are within us. And it's interesting that that book didn't make it because obviously it would have taken away all the power of the church. It would have taken all, all millennia of suffering that maybe the Christian church inflicted on others. What a shame that that book didn't make it.
one of those threads, I know I'm very curious about those gospels, and there is a thread that did uh remain, which was like treat your neighbor as yourself, right?
Uh,
And it's not about your neighbor being exactly like you. I think actually it's quite the opposite. They're different
uh.
you in some way. And they teach you something, and I'm pretty sure there's a lot of scripture about that. I mean, I still hold lots of Christian teaching, and Jesus is one of my spiritual guides. All of that is very close to my heart. And it has taken 49 years, that's how old I am at this moment, to find some ownership of all of the different things that I do. I've definitely been asked many times, what are you? In the are you a Christian? Are you a Hindu? And I think my ultimate answer is that I'm a weaver, and I just
Love it.
take all the things.
I love it. I love it. I love it. But is that not something that we are supposed to do? If we fast forward to today and the self-help guidance that we get is surround yourself with six people who are successful, who are making heaps of money, and it's very difficult for you not to make money. Surround yourself with six painters. That's very difficult for you not to get interested in painting, etc. So here we are. We are supposed to be the dumbest people, or the dumbest person within a group, within your power team, and that this is the best way to grow, that we have these mentors, etc. Would it not make sense to therefore look at different mentors, bring them into the team, and take the best from each mentor? And I think
Yeah.
that is the same with the religions, that's the same with belief systems. Because you said it earlier, our journey is meandering. We are on a beautiful path of life, but we can't see even 5 meters there because it's so overgrown. And suddenly there's this turn, and you don't know what is around the turn. And at the
And I can
moment,
certainly understand choosing one source to connect with. That can be very clarifying and grounding for people. So,
mm,
zero judgment on that. I totally understand that.
mm,
It's not the way I'm built, and that again is something that's taken me this
yeah,
long to own, but everyone is
mm,
different, right?
yeah. And but it's hard also in a relationship then. My ex-wife, she became a staunch Christian, and for her, yoga was evil. And I thought, come on, that is, there is, you're cutting out so much from the rest of the world. So I think once we talk about only fixation on one topic, on one belief system, we are becoming extremists. And that is not how the world can survive. This is not love thy neighbor. This is actually bullshit. So therefore, I'm drawn to your openness. I'm a martial artist, and the form of martial arts that I most adhere to and most love are taking skills from here and there and everywhere, whatever works, whatever makes you the most effective in achieving your goal, in this case, to stopping a fight. I think this makes sense rather than sticking with one thing that might not be applicable to that situation. So therefore, you're no, I love it that you combine the best of all worlds. How much is shamanism applicable to a modern world? To someone who is living in New York, in a high rise where maybe there is one tree, somewhere in the far distance, where we are surrounded by anything but nature.
Mm. All the more important, right? I mean, I live in a very urban setting as well, so sometimes we have to travel to it. But one of the other things I love about shamanic perspective is the focus on sacred relationship with all things. So while there's nothing quite like the actual energetic influence of nature, there is nature in all of us, right? In people and what we eat and what we put into our bodies, what we do with our bodies, the
Mhm.
practices that we have. There are many legal plant medicines that we can take and study. Yeah, I think there's every reason to be connected to shamanic wisdom today.
Right.
Um,
You were pointing towards the power of plant medicine. And there's no two ways around it. Many of the compounds that are in plants have never been investigated. So therefore, to utilize whole plants makes so much more sense. And that's why we in functional medicine say eat the rainbow, eat all the colors there and eat fresh food, not ultra processed foods. There is a lot of wisdom in that, and science backs us up nowadays. Yet there is also a gazillion dollar industry on herbals and on nutraceuticals, things that are not regulated, and there is a lot of shit out there. For someone who's studying plant medicine, what do you make out of all the infomercials and all the new, take two gummies of that and you're going to be young and healthy and you will live until you're 130? How can we distinguish bullshit from actually real help that allows us to become better humans?
yeah, I mean, it's tempting. It's tempting to me every day. Every time I see one of the things, I'm like, really? That's the thing? Okay. And slow down, relax. Yeah, it really helps to have trusted people and sources to dip into
Mm.
and learn from. I think it also helps to use some of that stillness and ask ourselves, where is our motivation or drive coming from?
Yeah,
Uh, I mean, this comes up for women who are aging all the time, right? We are constantly told that there's everything wrong with how we look. And as you said, there are industries, multi-billion dollar industries, I'm sure, that are
yeah,
providing the solutions. So I do think it's kind of an internal, external dance. Where is it coming from in you? Are you trying to fix something? Are you trying to pay attention to something in a more loving way? Are you slowing down? Are you just sort of satisfying a superficial need? We have to, again, know ourselves. It's
yeah.
that theme is just going to keep coming back around.
Mm.
And then we can navigate the external world a little bit smoother, I think.
Mm. And again, I think what you said, the guidance is really quite good to really ask yourself. The first question I always ask myself is what I am hearing true, the veracity of it. And then second, why is someone telling me that? And often
Mhm.
enough, there is monetary influences there that are there. And that's also a problem for us as doctors, for us as anyone who is interested in that field, because when you look at studies and if they are funded by the pharma industry, there are probably 90% chance that they are positive, that there is a positive outcome with regards to the drug XYZ on a problem ABC. If you are not funded, or if a study is not funded that is published, the chance that this is a positive outcome is much reduced. That alone gives you pause to think. So I think even if you say, oh, I want to see the evidence for it, I can create a study to prove anything. And I often say that there has never been a randomized controlled trial to examine the effectiveness of parachutes. There is no one has ever said, okay, it works or doesn't work. Can't prove that to you. Yet, here you are. On the flip side, when you say plant medicine, it's natural. It must be good, which is a heap of bullshit. Uh, arsenic is natural. So yeah, have a cup. So there's so much misperception out there. But again, this is where we need to invite people to be curious, not just about their inner state, but also about the informations that they are taking in, that they are believing, and the way we question the world around us, as well as within us. The interoception, just as much as the as what we are taking in. So it's actually a hell of a job when you think about it. How do you find a balance?
Yeah. do you find the balance? The dance. I mean, one thing that I constantly need to be reminded of is that it is a dance. It's not about a monolithic block and another monolithic block, finding stability and having no dynamic movement in that, and then you move. That's not how the
Yeah.
universe is typically, right? It's more like this. Forward, two steps back.
Oh,
I mean, wait, there's so much
hmm,
to navigate.
yeah.
So I'm growing compassion about that all the time.
What if I was to give you a time machine and I allow you to go back to a younger version of yourself? With hindsight, what would you have liked to know? Maybe two, three things that allow you to influence your younger version of yourself. What would that be?
Make as much art as possible. I was really, really angry and frustrated, and alienated and anxious and stressed and all of these things, all of which are totally valid in our teenage years or the human experience, I would say. And I chose that time to heavily self-medicate. There were great benefits to that as well. Um, but if I had had an older, trusted guide say to myself, yes, that is one way of channeling and dispersing this energy. And there are many actually. And you're an artist and you're going to make some of the most amazing art you'll ever make as a teenager. So do it. I mean, I did some I was playing lots of music and I wrote a lot, but I didn't believe in any of it. It was always about how it sounded and how it wasn't good enough. And um I would also tell her um to find ways of legitimately actually relaxing, right? Which I was always hoping marijuana would help me do. And she did. But yeah, still had so much tension and anger in my mind, and my body. I would also, oh man, so many things.
It's
I
beautiful.
would, sorry,
Please, no, ladies first.
I was going to bring back a little bit of the meditation. I cannot imagine myself sitting still at all, but find your tribe.
Hmm,
I did that as well at the time. Um, Man, I would not be here without my friends. It's always been like that.
hmm,
Uh, but again, I did a lot of hiding and
hmm,
obscuring
hmm,
of myself. I did a lot of going along to get along and assimilating, and um, it was always a dance for me to be different enough to be noticed, but not different enough to be at real risk. Uh, so yeah, actually letting people see all of you. Uh,
beautiful.
Terrifying.
Beautiful. Oh, yeah, isn't it? Warts and all. Oh,
I have a teenage daughter, so I am watching it again. Like it's so terrifying at that age,
oh.
but a beautiful, yeah, a beautiful wisdom of my older self. Still
Uh,
working on it.
Absolutely, because every day we grow if we let us. If we let us. Many of us have been stagnant for years for many, many different reasons. And often it takes trauma. Often it takes a completely unexpected circumstance for you to suddenly have to stand still. And I think that can be an incredible gift. It can be an incredible growth spurt that is waiting for you to happen because of the divorce, because of the job loss, because of the physical trauma that you suffered. It
Yeah.
is a beautiful thing. And I think there is a strength and a wisdom in accepting trauma and challenges in your life as guidance, as catalysts for you to become a better person. Once we can truly accept it, I think life is easier. It's just bloody hard when you're actually at the moment in that scenario. It
Yeah.
is, it
Unraveling it is hard too. I mean, that's why we're here, right? That's why there's so many helpers and practitioners to support people
mm,
because it's not easy. It's not linear.
mm,
It's not necessarily obvious.
yeah.
But the truth is there is a medicine in all of it and absolutely opportunities for art. I love to put that in there too,
And
in all of
and again, for those listening, you think art, come on, really? There's when it comes to trauma and PTSD and dealing with really negative things, often we are lacking words to describe those things. So those parts of the brain that we want to utilize, they really struggle to deal with those thoughts of the trauma, those emotions, those memories. It's hard to put it in words. It's much easier to put it into a painting or into a sculpture or into a song. And that is where we see such powerful improvements. So the cliche of the warrior painting a picture, it has been this art therapy has been there for decades, if not hundreds of years, because it is one way of dealing with trauma without having to talk about it and allowing healing to
it.
occur. So there is
I
a
think
lot to be said about that.
I do think with veterans and warriors, in particular, there's also another piece, which is that if you have been part of a lot of destruction, a great cosmic karmic balancing to that is creation, right? And it's, having the privilege of motherhood and watching all of these children. I mean, are there any situations for 2-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 6-year-olds where we tell them they cannot make art? It's really only as we get older and we start getting trained away from an actual raw expression that we believe that we don't have the right to do that, that it has to look a particular way. And I'm calling myself out on that. I mean, I've studied music since I was about 2 and been obsessed with perfectionism and how things sound and all of that. It's really only now that I'm starting to say it's actually about how you feel. We all got that. And yeah, I've seen some pretty amazing regulation, expression, improvement
Yeah.
in communication, improvement in intimacy,
Yeah.
right? And knowing yourself, just it can be 5 minutes with you and a pen and a napkin or a journal. It could be an Instagram post that you make. It
Yeah.
could be a surf session. It doesn't really matter what it is. It's just sort of the intention that you're taking your stuff that might be pre-language, right? Just before language doesn't have actual shape in our shared reality quite yet, but it's still in there. Taking it and moving it in some way. Um, yeah, it's pretty powerful.
I knew that this interview would provide me with a big breakthrough. I sensed it before we started. I knew it. I was a bit afraid of this interview, and I don't know why. And now I know because I've never seen creativity as the opposite to destruction. So when we have got trauma and distraction on the one hand, on the other hand, we have got the creativity. Oh, that is an insight, and that explains so much. And equally, you have got distraction, but also you have got again finding a purpose. And there are many, many people out there who can become quite creative. One of my first guests on my show was a type A personality warrior who ended up really literally living in a block hut in the mountains after he was shot to pieces on the battlefield and he couldn't come to terms with. And finally, he listened to some friends, some veterans who were persistent. Come along, come out of the mountain. Come on, we'll do something. And we play golf. And he hated golf. And then they said, okay, come on, we are going out. We are learning how to be comedians, stand-up comedy. And guess what he is nowadays? He's a
Oh my
stand-up
God.
comedian. He is. Talk about creativity. Talk about actually channeling. I've got goosebumps actually thinking of him and thinking of that story, because it is this creativity that can give us a new purpose. But for that, we need to stand still. And maybe he needed those years of solitude, of living with the demons, until he was ready to move on. And I think that is what so many of us have experienced. Many of us have gone through years and years and years of darkness. But I hope that we have shown you here that there are ways forward, that there are ways inside of you waiting to come out. There are answers inside of you that are waiting to be released. You need to give yourself permission to tap into the answers of the universe, which are laid down inside of you, like it or lump it. Whatever your belief system is, I don't really care. It is, the answers are there. How you take the next step and provide the stillness, the calmness, or at least the willingness to shut up and listen to the chaos, but also ask the right questions and channel the right energy so that you allow those questions to be answered. That is powerful. And it's waiting. It's waiting to be released. But it can be a challenging task. Not it can be. It will be.
Yeah,
100%. 100% it will be a challenge. The worst place is to be with
100%.
yourself.
Oh, pretty fucking rewarding. Yeah, I mean, it's no, it's one coin, two sides. And the more we do it, I think, the
Yeah.
more that we go through that dance, uh,
Mm.
the more that we get that that's actually kind of the human existence. And we can go into those places with fear and still show up and still do it, right? We can go in
Yeah.
fearlessly and get our asses handed to us. We can do all the things. But it's just on the other side of each of those moments is so much richness, so much more pleasure, and
Mm.
so much more intimate connection with ourselves and source.
And isn't it amazing what the two of us just talked about? We were incredibly raw, we were incredibly open, authentic. We talked about our own situations without going into too much detail. I'm sure there was a lot of darkness in your life over times, the same in mine. Yet there is this incredibly powerful torch of hope. Now, that torch is now, again, a torch and a bright light. There was a time when it was barely a glimmer and was about to be snuffed out by the lightest of winds. Yet we can practice those situations that guide us along away from the darkness and towards the light. And
Yeah.
that is powerful. And for that, you need to be open. For that, you need to have meaningful conversations or listening to them in this case here, with us repeating on about how energy is just waiting to be released. But I think that is the key message from this interview. There are so many teachers waiting out there, and they might come in all kind of weird forms. And so even if something at the moment doesn't fit in maybe in your a characteristic belief system, your original belief system. Let's say you were brought up as a Catholic. Just open yourself up. And you can still be a Catholic and believe with all that, but you can also be open towards meditation. And it's not an evil thing or trauma-focused movements, Tai Chi, Qigong, those kind of things. They come from different belief systems. Will they release some of the trauma? Will they work on neurofacial flow? Will they work on release of tension? Very much so. So therefore, be open, be willing Be curious. Let me do that. That's where the magic happens. Wouldn't you agree?
I'd agree. I would
Hmm.
agree.
Athena, you're an amazing woman. Thank you so much for an absolute wonderful interview. Thank you, thank you. If people want to know more about you, if they want to interact with you, where can they find you?
They can definitely find me on Instagram.
Mhm.
I am at Soulful Healing and Counsel, Council. And I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm super
Mhm.
happy to connect and field any questions. I actually have a music website that I forget about, which I believe is my whole name, athenadesai.com. You can check
Mhm.
out some of my music. Yeah, I love connecting, so I'm here.
Beautiful. Guys, look down there in the description of the YouTube video and of the podcast. Whilst you're down there, please press the like and subscribe button and tell your friends. This has been an amazing interview. I grew a lot today. Athena, thank you so much for being a guest on my show. You're an amazing woman. This was a blast. Thank you.
So much fun. Thank you so much.
And you guys out there, look after yourself and live with intention. Bye.